Alright, listen up, cabbies. I got your assignments. Riga, 643. Wheeler, 148. Nado, 804. And all of you need to join host HP and Father Malone as they examine one of the greatest sitcoms in television history, Taxi, in Night Mr. Walters, a Taxi podcast. Banter, zero, like your boxing record.
Night, Mr. Walters.
We're in Ray Media.
Greetings, Midnight viewers. We have another very special episode for you. We got to sit down and talk with Tales from the Darkside royalty, Mr. Bradley Fisher. He appears in one of tonight's episodes, I'll Give You a Million, and will again in Season 4's No Strings. Mr. Fisher tells us all about his time in the Darkside, but we also chat about his experiences on everything from the A-Team to Westworld, from Happy Days to Beau is Afraid. So check that out at the halfway point, and as always, try to enjoy the daylight. Welcome back to Midnight Viewing, the horror anthology podcast, where this season we're taking a look at George A. Romero's 1980s series, Tales from the Darkside. Sharing the Midnight View with me are the Projection Booth's Mike White.
Oh, I would sell my soul to have more people listen to this podcast.
And the Culture Cast's Chris Stachiw.
You know, I heard Bart Simpson sold his soul one time, and it didn't work out too well for him either.
It's not going to work out for anybody. Tonight, we're taking a look at two episodes from Season 1. They are I'll Give You a Million and Painkiller. I'll Give You a Million is Season 1, Episode 2. It originally aired on October the 7th, 1984. Written by Mark Durand and David Scheel from a story by John Harrison. Also directed by that very same John Harrison. Stars Keenan Wynn, that Chester Copperpot to you nostalgia nerds. In The Goonies, he appears in the newspaper article about the character's disappearance. George Petrie, he appeared in Twilight Zone 85, Shadow Play, which is a remake of the Chuck Beaumont. He was the judge in that. He was a big TV guy, but he also had the distinction of appearing on both The Addams Family and The Munsters. It also stars Michael Freeman and Bradley Fisher as the devil. Spoilers. He's still working strong today. He was just in Beau is Afraid. He was in that Welcome to Chippendales series. He was in 7 episodes of Westworld. But before we talk about the episode proper, I do have to talk about John Harrison for a moment. He is a large looming figure in Tales from the Darkside and in George Romero's films and in his own right. Back in the early 1970s, he played bass for Roy Buchanan on 4 albums and toured with him. This is after he graduated from Emerson College and Carnegie Mellon for film. In the Pittsburgh area, he partnered up with a fellow by the name of Pasquale Buba, who'd eventually be one of the editors on Michael Mann's Heat.
That's not a real name.
There's
Come
no
on.
way. Yeah, you're trying to pass one off on us right here. It's a
come
new
on.
year, Father Malone. We're not suckers like that. Pasquale Booba.
Wasn't born yesterday.
He is such a good editor. Okay, listen, Pasquale Buba, in addition to working behind the scenes in films, worked occasionally in front of the camera. He's a drug dealer in Martin, which was directed by George Romero, which is how these fellows got connected. John Harrison appears on screen in Dawn of the Dead. He's the screwdriver zombie, the one that Roger has to tangle with after it grabs hold of his newly found sweater. And he has a bit part in Night Riders. But Romero would utilize him on his next 2 films, Creepshow and The Day of the Dead, as his first assistant director. And it was on Creepshow that Harrison's musical background came to the fore, because originally Romero intended to score Creepshow entirely with library tracks. But when they got to the editing phase, they realized that they needed some music to tie everything together, so Harrison was enlisted. Now, I mentioned in our last episode that the soundtrack to Martin by Donald Rubinstein is one of my favorite film scores. Creepshow is my favorite film score. The main theme to that film, I would put up against any orchestral score in cinema history. That is a hill I will die on. He'd also do the soundtrack to Day of the Dead, which if you're a fan of Gorillaz, they sampled quite heavily in the first album. This episode of Tales marks his episodic television directorial debut, but it would not be his last. He did 2 Tales from the Crypt episodes. He did the 2000 miniseries of Dune and its sequel. He did half a dozen episodes of Leverage. His current standing on the current Creepshow is 8 episodes, which ties his record here on Darkside. At a certain point, we're going to take a look at Tales from the Darkside, the movie. That was also directed by John Harrison. Now then, I'll give you $1 million. It is the tale of 2 bitter, evil tycoons whose debates on the existence of the afterlife comes with a price. What'd you think of this one, Chris?
I mentioned The Simpsons at the beginning of this, and it feels like almost too on the nose to have mentioned The Simpsons, because there's an episode of The Simpsons, both Treehouse of Horror and not, that feature this exact same plot line. So when I was watching it, I was like, oh, wow, this is just, oh, someone sells their soul and then the devil comes to collect. I thought it was fine. I'm not sure it told a story that I haven't heard before or does anything particularly interesting with the narrative, but it's a solid episode. And Keenan Wynn is fun. I think it's a fun episode. It's fun to see these 2 old assholes just be old, rich assholes. That's fun. If these guys existed in real life, they're not getting their comeuppance either way. So that's the sad reality of a story like this. So a little bit of this is wish fulfillment of getting to see these 2 old, rich, embittered assholes be terrible to each other and both get taken down in the end. So there's a little bit of wish fulfillment there. So it's fun.
This seemed like a sequel to Trading Places for me. This is like Randolph and Mortimer Duke going at it through this whole thing, to the point where I had to look up Trading Places because I was like, what were their names again? It had been a minute since I had seen that. And I was like, oh, okay, no, Duncan Williams, Jack Blaine. All right, I'm good. I'll definitely side with Chris as far as we've seen people sell their souls a lot. I've never really seen or remember, and maybe this was what was going on in the Bard episode, I don't remember someone not collecting. And this whole thing of trying to double, Keenan Wynn has this whole scheme of doubling his money because he's freaked out his friend so much, and he's going to get $2 million from this and easiest money he ever made. And then when his friend shows up with his soul, it's pretty rinky-dink, this effect, but whatever. When he shows up with his soul, he's just like, hey, you got to take this from me. This is yours. This is your property. And then the devil shows up. I was like, oh, that's nice. I thought that was a nice twist on it. And just seeing Keenan Wynn be such an asshole through this whole thing, that was delightful. I love Keenan Wynn. I love his big, overbearing personality. I love that huge thatch of hair he's got on his chest. That's just glorious. And when the devil puts his hands in that chest hair, I was like, oh man, I don't think I could do that. But it was fun. I really had a good time with this one.
Tales from the Darkside really likes old people being mean, either other old people or to young people, because 2 of the 4 episodes so far have just been old people being mean to one another. I guess 3 of the 4, technically. Old people being mean to each other or young people. So I'm liking this trend. It's bizarre and fun.
It is a trait of Tales from the Darkside that they never shy away from the horribleness of the elderly. We get it here. We're going to get it a lot. Looking forward to it. This episode could have been titled Cackling and Cognac. These guys do a lot of that. They also, what came to mind immediately when the episode starts, these guys are riding in the back of a limousine, toasting some other person that they've crushed, potentially murdered, that they could very well be contemporaries of Ups and Pratt from Creepshow. Like, they have his number memorized. When they go to, I mentioned in the last episode that Tales from the Darkside would alternate episodes where they would shoot it, either on the West Coast or the East. This is definitely a West Coast because Keenan Wynn's house, the address is so prominently displayed. I had to look it up. It's 2405 Glendower, which used to be the Russian consulate from 1938 to 1955. It's been Michael Feinstein's home for the past, 20 or so years, where he bought it for $2 million, currently selling for $26. Good for him. One of the things I really liked in this episode was that when they're playing billiards, they keep betting on every shot, but they seem to have to pay the bet immediately, which means that they have tens of thousands of dollars in cash in their wallets.
Right?
It was a little crazy, like 5,000 on this one. All right. Fold, takes out the billfold, counts out $5,000. Wow. It's just walking around money. Also, do these two wear tuxedos at all times?
They're like stereotypical rich. They're like monocle having, tuxedo wearing, drinking champagne out of flute glasses all the time and cognac and everything else, and constantly smoking cigars. They are the epitome of stereotypical I don't know, I'm going to say turn of the century rich, but there's something timeless about the story, the way that they do it. So it's hard to place exactly when it takes place, but they're just like the stereotype rich. You expect them to go harumph every time they say something.
You know what's funny, though? If this was a Night Gallery episode, we would definitely not have any idea what time period this was. I absolutely knew it was like 1984, and here's these two rich old bastards who are holdovers from the earlier part of the century. What's funny is when they finally do get out of their tuxes, it's Keenan Wynn in his garden, and he's doing a little bit of gardening, and I was shocked he wasn't in the tux. I really hoped he would be when George Petrie comes to visit him again. Yeah, you're right. Keenan Wynn is such a mean bastard, and it's a really very well-written script. The dialogue is all very good. Like when George Petrie comes to tell him that he's dying, he says, "Let me guess, it's your liver." He says, "Yes, it is." He says, "Have a drink."
Right.
It's a good friend, that one.
Oh, yeah. Always looking out for his buddy.
The score here is by John Harrison, working off of that Prophet 5 synthesizer he used for the entirety of the Creepshow score. Here was a weird thing for me in the episode. When Blaine, George Petrie's character, finally dies, Keenan Wynn immediately receives a phone call from his maid. Was she instructed? She doesn't say she was. Like, it's the weirdest thing ever. It's talk about mimicking Creepshow. This Upson Pratt, right before he gets his final comeuppance, gets a call from the widow of some man he had basically crushed who had committed suicide earlier the day. This mimics that entirely, but makes zero sense because the maid has no stake in this at all. Anyway, struck me very weird.
It's so tight with just these few characters. Both episodes we're going to talk about, and really I think the episodes we've talked about already, very spare when it comes to the number of characters, and I love it. Like, we don't need large expanses of all these different characters and traveling through history and all this kind of stuff. I'm looking at you, Night Gallery, but this is great. It's basically 3 people. Just it's so small when it comes to the scale of this story, but it just works so well.
It is a half-hour episode, which is at least the length of a long episode of Night Gallery. And at no point did it feel boring or let's get to the point. Even as obvious as the storytelling was, as the plot was, like even before the twist, it is the devil and Daniel Webster. It is I sold my soul. We got to have some sort of trial about it. But it flies along. Fair. It is just cut to the bone. When the devil shows up, he reminded me of Taco from that new way of putting on the Ritz.
You're blue and you don't know where to go. Yeah, boy, he had some
Joel Grey energy for me.
Yeah, he had a lot of pancake makeup on, that's for sure. He's very white in the face.
That is, as I said, that's the fellow who's on Westworld. And now, I liked him as the devil, actually. That's a devil we don't see too often.
I like the shot of him looking at his green hand. They put the green light in his hand and he's just staring at it. This show is reveling in how fun it is. Like Night Gallery kind of always took itself a little seriously. I don't think this show is taking itself nearly as seriously as Night Gallery did. And I am all for that, personally. Night Gallery kind of got to be a drag because it never seemed to understand how to have fun. And I don't know whose fault that was, but this show already feels he's reaching into this dumbass green jar and pulling out the soul of the guy. It's so hokey, but who cares? It's fun. Whatever.
I loved that effect, by the way. In fact, I wrote it down. When he reaches in, he grabs the soul, pulls his hand out, and then they immediately have the George Petrie's ghost fade away as he's. Yeah. I thought it worked like gangbusters. Like, it is the cheapest effect. Like, it is the most spare kind of filmmaking, but hell if it doesn't work, as long as your storytelling is solid.
I made fun of that effect, but it's very effective. It works, especially for this story. You just have a light in the bottom and some smoke effect going on. It's perfect. What else is a soul going to look like? Who knows?
Speaking of smoke, they have little wisps of smoke everywhere George Petrie steps. They're pumping fog through his pants or through the shoes. So every time his foot comes down, a little wisp of smoke comes away with it. Fucking fantastic effect.
And he looks pretty gross too. He's got some things hanging off of his face that don't look great. They look good in terms of the quality, but it looks proper gross. So yeah, I don't know. There's something about this that I'm enjoying already. Just like there's already been like zombies and all kinds of horse shit in this show. Like awesome. Like I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
Yeah, as I said, they're not going to shy away from all of the supernatural elements. They're going whole hog. And you know what? If that means we get 17 episodes where there's a deal with the devil, I'm cool with that. As long as they're fucking out front with, here it is, folks. The devil is real and he walks among us, and that's the world we live in.
He's got pockets full of flash paper, baby.
I mean, let's be honest, when it comes to the Twilight Zone 85, some of my favorite episodes were the deals with the devil episodes, or the ones where obviously the famous one with Ron Glass being the devil, such a great episode. And then the one with Dan Hedaya being the devil. I love those episodes.
Speaking of another hairy man.
Yes.
The hairiest of hairy men.
Yes.
Isn't that right, Matrix?
And that hairy chest certainly comes in handy for the visual effects team here, where they mock up his chest. So you get to burn that hair away to reveal the effect. I loved it. The effect too is great. The burn the paid in full. Oh yeah, that
was such a comic book panel, right?
Yes. This feels to me like what Creepshow the show would have been if they had made it in the 80s. Because I don't know if we'll ever go back to that Creepshow show. Father Malone, you and I covered it at one point on Chronicles from the Crypt. We did it for a couple episodes, but like this tonally already feels so much like Creepshow that I'm like that. Yeah, just the text on his chest alone at the end and where they leave this episode, like you said, Mike, it's visually arresting, which makes sense for what this is going for.
Oh, we'll get to Creepshow eventually. This is the horror anthology podcast. I'm so excited to be talking to you today. This is everybody here at Midnight Viewing. We're talking to Bradley Fisher. He's Tales from the Dark Side of royalty, appearing on not one but two episodes, and not only appearing in the episodes, but you're a devil. You're the devil in one of the best episodes of the entire series. We want to talk to you about both of those episodes of the show, but before we get there, I want to find out how you got there. Like, what gave you the bug? What was the theatrical thing that grabbed hold of you? What led you on the path, as it were?
How did I get onto like Tales of the Dark Side? What that situation was?
Yes, sir.
Well, that's a fun story. I think it was 1983. I was doing a play called Brooklyn, USA. It was directed by T.J. Castronova, who is the producer, executive producer, and actually the director of No Strings. And so we were doing this, and I was playing a guy named Smiley Malone, and he was a Brooklyn gangster and a killer, a wild man. And so TJ had just gotten this anthology series going, and when this came up, he thought I'd be right for the devil and cast me. So that's how I got both parts in this series, and this part was especially fun because it was with Keenan Wynn and George Petrie, who were, Keenan Wynn, Jesus.
Yeah, my God,
Doctor,
you're going to have to answer to the Coca-Cola company.
Yeah, right. So that was the genesis of how that I got that part anyway.
Now I have to ask. Now I've spoken to a couple of behind the scenes folks at Tales from the Dark Side, and evidently the production was split on different coasts. Some episodes filmed West Coast, some East. Where were yours filmed?
West Coast.
Both were West Coast?
Yes, both were West Coast. That's where TJ was based. Castronova was based here in these warehouse studios, I think in like industrial area of Los Angeles, actually.
Oh, whereabouts, may I ask? Because I know the folks we spoke to were all East Coast folks, and then they were in a warehouse in Queens. Now, I know my way around Los Angeles, so I'm wondering...
Well, I think this was close, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was close to where the old Sears building was.
Oh, okay.
Sort of East LA kind of area. So in somewhere in that area, I believe.
I love that that's where it was in the 1980s in Los Angeles. Yeah. But it must have been so terrifying just to be over there.
Just to get off at DeSoto to get to the studio was frightening. Where you even get past the freeway off-ramp.
Now, could you tell me, what was your experience like with Mr. Keenan Wynn? He just, like, what a towering figure in cinema and just entertainment in general.
No, absolutely. I was a day player. I shot one day. So I came literally on the last day of shooting. And I think they had it was 5 production days for these things. And I talked to him. It was like he was pretty old at the time, and he was just working. He was just sort of in that mode of his just happy to be doing something at the back end of his career. And so we chatted about, I told him I was such a fan and that I enjoyed all the movies. And, there were stories there, but it seemed like he didn't want to give too much. He was he was there to get his paid in full burned into his chest. And that was, as soon as that was done, he was done. So it was a pleasure. I mean, my God, it's Keenan Wynn. So at least I have that moment to remember. And George Petrie was sort of fun too. I mean, he was a little friendlier than Keenan. And I just loved George, not so much for the parts that he did, but he was like Groucho Marx's sideman on Groucho Marx quiz show. So have a little chat, and I'm a Marx Brothers fan, so it was fun chatting with him too. So yeah, it was a good, day player. Hello, goodbye with these two guys. Yeah.
What's your favorite Marx Brothers film?
Duck Soup.
Duck Soup. Well, yeah, it's kind of hard to beat, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I can't even counter. TJ Castronova, he's a figure that looms large in 2 of my podcasts. My friend HP and I do a taxi podcast, and he was featured quite heavily on the show over at Mario's. He was running Mario's. Anyway, what was he like? Because I know he's running the show really at Tales from the Dark Side.
Well, TJ was awesome. I love TJ. I mean, TJ gave me really my first big break as far as a theater actor was concerned, in the sense I'd been a ballet dancer for 10 years, and I was getting away from that because I couldn't make a good living. And the first play I auditioned for out of that was Brooklyn, USA. And so he cast me, and I mean, that show had been done before that he directed, and he was just remounting it. And Brooklyn and Smiley Malone was the lead character. So he had a lot of guys on there that had done the show before. So there was a little bit of a, not jealousy thing, but who's this guy coming in?
Sure.
And so he went against a couple of the cast members and cast me, and we became friends. But he was Brooklyn. I mean, he was New York, tough guy, the whole 9 yards. I mean, but sweet, hard to go, and a good looking guy. I loved working with TJ, and he was just a lot of fun. He was a New York guy. And so that's the best way I think you can describe him. No nonsense, no bullshit, just, and so he the pizza guy owner on Taxi, and in general, just how he always wore a sports coat, always looked good, well dressed. Yeah, he was 80s New York.
Well, 80s New York is apparently what horror anthology needed. We've been doing a lot of horror anthologies, and they all falter at some point. This one didn't, and I'm gonna lay that at his feet, because this one never flagged in quality. One that did, one that fell really hard for us was The Twilight Zone 1985, but not your episode. We like Dead Run quite a bit.
Yeah, well, there were some decent actors in Dead Run that went on. Brent, who that wasn't his name when we did Dead Run. It was another guy. He had just gone out of New York. He did, I think, Sunday in the Park with George under a different stage name, and then he was in Dead Run with me and Jimmy Skaggs and Steve Railsback. So there was,
my God, Charles Manson himself. Run.
Absolutely. Sweet guy and a stuntman.
Before I forget it, this is a total tangent, but you were witness to one of the greatest fights of all time between Tom Hanks and Fonzie on Happy Days.
Oh my God! What? You've done some nice research.
What a legendary episode! And there you are having a burger while they're squaring off. Oh my God! Please tell me about that experience.
Yeah, well, that literally was. My first part on film was a taxi driver in Days of Our Lives. But my first part with my SAG card, because at that time, SAG and AFTRA were two different unions, was the Tom Hanks Fonzie show where, I'm eating a burger and he comes over and he goes, hey, and I go, so what? My first two lines, immortalized forever with the Fonz. And yeah, that was, and plus I was there the entire episode because a lot of it was in the diner. And
Arnold, that new Arnold's, that wood-paneled Arnold's. What the hell was going on there?
They were just trying to figure it out. Ron was gone, and it was Fonzie's show by that time. So Fonzie and Chachi and Joni, and not as strong a show as the old ones were, but that one was fun. And Hanks was just off the wall, like this young kid, just riffing all the way. Not unlike when Robin Williams did his bit, but not as crazy. But yeah, and a sweet man. Tom Hanks, very sweet man. I worked with Henry on another show about 15 years ago. And I think this was at a point where Henry was like trying to forget that he did Fonzie. And now he's okay. He's written a book. He's accepted the notoriety and the fame and looks back on it fondly. But at the time, I don't think, because I reminded him, I said, hey, I did my first SAG line with you. And he goes, yeah, whatever. And he walked away. And I'm going, okay, that wasn't what I expected. But now he's an elder statesman now. And
Fonzie must have been a heavy burden for a long time. So
come on. That he lived with that forever. And I mean, there were tough times, I'm sure, for him as an actor to get away from that. But yeah, so, and the show that we did wasn't the greatest film. So I'm not sure he was too pleased about being there.
But you'll always have Happy Days. And now he's even happy about it.
No, in sense. And he's really sweet. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, since I'm in tangent land with you, I also do a podcast about Banachek. Now, you were on the A-Team. Please tell me about George Peppard. George Peppard seems like, if I may, seems like a detestable person, but I adore every inch of the man.
Well, his movie career is pretty spectacular.
Fantastic. Without fail, yes.
So, I mean, he went on to the A-Team after being a major, heartthrob movie star. And so I don't think he was really, I think that was a paycheck for George, but I didn't have that much to do with George. George wasn't in the scene I did. As a matter of fact, the scene I did never made final cut because I got cast in that based on the Brooklyn, USA play.
Oh my God, it just keeps giving.
Yeah, it really did. And gave me this great story. The casting director saw this tough guy, and I was very tough in the play. And so she cast me as this GI MP. And the van drives up to this check post, and I'm rousting Mr. T. Now, I may be a tough guy, but I'm 5'7". Okay, 140 pounds wet. Mr. T, I start with this thing. First of all, they give me one of those old-fashioned walkie-talkies that's about 2 feet big,
Sure.
an M1 rifle. So I've got a walkie-talkie in one hand, an M1 rifle in the other, a helmet that's a little bit too big on my head. One of my parts. So I'm panicking in the sense that I'm so happy to be there, but I didn't have the balls to say, helmet's too big. What the hell is this walkie-talkie doing? How can I tell anything? So anyway, they drive up. Now, this is the first time Mr. T actually sees me, and they're shooting. And so I tell him to get out of the van, and I have to pull the antenna on the walkie-talkie up. My first line is into the walkie-talkie while I'm holding my M1 gun on Mr. T, who gets out of the van. So I pull up the pin on the walkie-talkie. I hit my helmet, which starts spinning around. My head. And I'm trying to talk tough to Mr. T. Mr. T literally picks me up by my uniform off the ground and goes to the director. What the fuck are we doing with this guy trying to rouse me up? This is ridiculous. And I can't even really remember the exact line, but it was funnier and it was so Mr. T. And anyway, so he puts me down. The director goes, moving on. That was my moment, and a story for the rest of my life. My moment with Mr. T. And truly, and it could have been, if I would have been aware, if I would have been not so anxious about the whole situation, I could have made it a real comedy. And I wish I would. I wish I would have just gone with the hat spinning around.
Oh my God.
And a real Don Knotts moment, and then maybe they might have kept it in.
But still, you were manhandled by Mr. T at the exact right time.
Yeah, was I ever.
All right, back to Tales from the Dark Side, if you don't mind speaking specifically about I'll give you $1 million. When it came to your devil, let's talk about the look of your devil. How much input did you have in that, if any?
Well, no, I definitely saw him as sort of androgynous, and the wardrobe was the wardrobe. I mean, that sort of lends itself very much to how you're playing it. And the director, Harrison, was all for making him sort of non-sexual or asexual, and that whole inference of just being, this is his job, this is what he loves to do, and he's got this guy, and it's such, these are his joys in his eternal life.
Look, there are a couple of actually great portrayals of the devil over the years, and very few of them touch on the one on a flavor that you landed on, which is elegant. Nobody lets the devil be elegant, and why wouldn't he be? He's having the time of his life.
Absolutely, he's the only one that's really having fun in the scope of good and evil. Good, you're always afraid of evil coming in, and how do you prevent evil, and how do you stop it? The devil, I mean, this is he doesn't have anything to fear.
Yeah, why wouldn't he be just bemused by every little thing? Like, there's really no consequence to him. So I just adored your portrayal of him. Let me just
say. Thank you so much, Rob. That means a lot. Thank you. It's amazing that it gets the kind of reception that you've given it. I'm flattered, to say the least.
It's a superior episode of television, and in no small part to you and your performance. Also, you guys went with the paler kind of, definitely the paler devil, which again suited it perfectly. I will say that we've already reviewed this episode. One of us referred to it as a Joel Grey look, but I kind of referred to it as a taco look. You remember putting on the Ritz? It was very popular at that moment in time.
the Gene Wilder putting on the Ritz
No. There was like this new wave guy in like 82, 83,
oh, yes,
Taco, remember?
that's right.
A disco version.
I know what you're talking about now, but I got to tell you that wasn't the thought, and Joel Grey really wasn't the thought either. Although I've been compared to Joel Grey before because of musical theater and stuff, but it was more just, yeah, there was no definite person or actor or character that we were going for. It was just what we the wardrobe, as you know, you put on wardrobe and it creates, and I definitely had a specific idea in mind that I wanted him to look like with the hair and they actually went with that as far as the pale skin, the red lips. It was so it was like not defined by any other character. Just
I'm certainly not suggesting it was an analog one for one that you were taking, because it is obvious that it's of a piece. I'm sure once you put those clothes on and slick the hair back, you're like, well, what else are we doing? This is the natural thing, right?
Right. But I mean, it's funny, the putting on the Ritz. I'm going to have to go look at that because I haven't.
He's in a tux with pale skin.
Right. No, I gotta check it out.
I'll have to put a video together. We'll do a mashup. Anyway. Okay. So you worked with John Harrison. Now, this is his first directing of anything, really.
Yeah.
And he looms large in the Tales from the Darkside universe and the George Romero universe. So what was your experience like with working with him?
It was awesome. I mean, it was definitely, he saw the genesis of the devil as far as what we wanted to do with it. And so he was totally, I had gone in with the devil with a bit of a different slant on it. And his whole slant was say, let's make him a little more androgynous. Let's make him a little bit, you don't know which way he's swinging sexually because he probably swings both ways. And so it was like, that was his idea. And it was brilliant. I thought, yeah, absolutely. So he had a lot to say about that.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Now, okay, if you don't mind moving on to the most grisly goddamned half hour of television. Certainly, I was very young when this was on, but let me qualify that. At the time, I was a gore hound. I was a Romero fan. I loved all of the most splatter things, the Nightmare on Elm Streets, your Freddys, your Jasons, your Michael Myers. Nevertheless, unprepared for the human puppeteering going to be going on television with the straightest of faces.
Oh my God. The guy who played him, I can't think of his name right now, but who was the puppet. He was something. He was something awesome. Had the majority of the dialogue, and yeah, it was gruesome. It was gruesome.
I believe that Derek Laughlin was his name. Don Pauli's corpse.
Yeah, so good. And it was not an easy situation for him, as just far as the hookup and all of that situation. And so it was, once again, a gangster. I was playing a gangster very much like the gangster I played in the play. And TJ was TJ playing the big boss.
Now, you said he directed this. Is that he's not credited as the director of it?
He didn't direct. He started it, so I'm not sure. No, he didn't direct it. Another guy directed that.
A fellow by the name of David Odell.
That's right, David Odell, who was absolutely. David Odell directed, and I think he's done a few things too. I think he did Supergirl or something like that.
He wrote Supergirl. He wrote The Dark Crystal.
Oh yeah, so there you go. Some good stuff. No, and he was a sweet guy too. But that was and TJ just played, the boss that wanted to be boss. But you see TJ in that, and if you just make him a nicer version of that, that is TJ Best.
But how excited were you that you didn't have to be the makeup in this one? My God, you got to float around and just be the kind of character actor in this one.
Yeah, this was I'm having a little side fling with the boss's girlfriend too, so that was sort of fun. And yes, playing that character was a good time. It was you know, as an actor, I when I look at that, I thought, oh, maybe I could have been a little funnier here. But it's just was such a fun piece to do. And working with, and Cameron, the girl, she was very sweet, and TJ, and it was just just one of those things, these anthologies, you know, I worked the Twilight Zone, these two, they were going.
Yeah, speaking of anthologies, okay, look, you've been in some of the best, as far as I'm concerned. Tales from the Darkside, The Twilight Zone, your episode. That series got problematic in the third season. It was not great. But can I just say, as far as modern anthologies go, the most modern interpretation of an anthology horror series is American Horror Story. And let me just say, sir, that you managed to be in the one scene that is actually horrific in like 12 seasons of American Horror Story. I watch every season of that show waiting to be horrified. That's the scene. That's a great season, Hotel, but your scene and what's going on in it is just heartbreaking.
It is an awesome scene. Evan was a joy, and I mean, as pure evil as you could possibly get. And just the whole, how they shot it. I mean, I think it was Brad that was the director on that. And I mean, he had every angle possible to get it. And so this is just the eeriness, the atmosphere of the whole thing of leading up, you know, and it was just, it was creepy. I love that little piece in there. Yeah. Thank you.
You're great, but like I said, seeing someone in that sort of situation always just, it's like Miller's Crossing me, you know, like it's very, very disturbing to watch, and you're great in it. So.
Oh, thanks so much. And that Miller's Crossing, one of my all-time favorite movies. Just brilliant.
Mine too.
Have you had a chance to see the short film I did with Ari Aster?
I've seen what I could see on your demo reel.
Well, okay, because that's a fun piece. That was the last short film that Ari did before he did Hereditary.
Right.
And you can find that on YouTube. That's a fun piece. I'm proud of that piece as well.
Hear that, listeners? Check all of Mr. Fisher's stuff out. You're not going to be disappointed. The man has gone toe-to-toe with Indiana Jones, for God's sake.
That's right, baby. How fun was that?
Unbelievably fun.
Yeah. And spent quite a bit of time in Montana. But it was all worth it for just that one scene with Harrison Ford, and who's a wonderful man, a sweet, sweet guy. And just playing cowboys and asshole ranchers, you know, it was fun. I was working across the table from him was very, very special. A memory.
You keep playing erudite cowboys. I've noticed you're always sort of, you know, you're not the rough and tumble guy out there. You're more of a bowler hat fella. Back in Westworld as well. It's like, my God, man, you know what? You're the rarest of creatures, Mr. Fisher. You're the working actor, and you work in great stuff, man. Beau is Afraid. He's in Beau is Afraid, listeners.
Beau's Afraid. Well, that's thankful to C'est La Vie. Ari cast me in C'est La Vie as this, you know, birthday boy staff man. And it basically, the C'est La Vie character, like the genesis of Chester Crummings, is basically birthday boy stab man. So thank you, Ari, for putting me in there. 2 weeks in Montreal, a lot of fun working with Joaquin. Yeah, you know, you think about the people I've worked with, and it's pretty amazing.
Staggering is a good word for it.
Yeah, so I've been very, very fortunate, and I am the epitome of the journeyman actor, and it's been very good to me, and I've never had to deal with any of the heartache of being bigger than I should have ever been. But it's been blessed. I've been very, very lucky. Yeah.
Lucky only gets you so far, man. You're no slouch. You're always interesting and always fun to watch. So definitely here on these 2 episodes of Tales from the Darkside, like you're right there, right at the ground floor, and right at your own ground floor, it would seem.
Well, man, that's very sweet. Thank you. I'm happy that you've seen it. I'm happy that you've looked at my work. But my work means a lot to me in the sense that I love acting. I've loved acting since I'm in I started in 22. I started professionally in Dublin, Ireland. and I've been doing it ever since. So it's thrilling that you've seen my stuff and that you like my stuff. I'm very flattered. Thank you.
Well, we're big fans. We'll be shouting you out and linking you to things and such. We'll do all the cross promotion. Do you have anything coming up you want to mention? Or
I did a movie called Isaac. I don't know where it's at right now. It's sort of a Chinese American co-production, and I play basically the head of a country that's trying to get rid of AI because AI is taking over, and I'm not too happy about it. But this one should be interesting. I don't know. It's beautiful to look at. Whether it ever comes out, it's one of those situations. I don't know.
That's where we are these days, unfortunately.
Yeah. But right now it's called Isaac, and it's a fun, nasty character again. So
fantastic. We'll keep an eye out for Isaac. Oh, one last thing, Parks and Rec.
Oh man, Parks and Rec not saved my life, but my wife and I were stand-ins on Parks and Rec.
Oh,
and this was at leaner times acting wise, and so we worked that every year that it was on, and probably the most fun I've ever had on set. Funniest people I've ever been around in my life.
I can only imagine. It's one of the greatest sitcoms of all time, and can only imagine just being adjacent to it.
Well, and plus, I mean, as a stand-in, you're right there every second of the day. You're in rehearsals, you're watching the takes, and truly, I mean, the funniest stuff in that show never got shown. It was just these guys riffing, and all of them so brilliant, so sweet, so kind, and good friends were made. So I'm very, very, very proud of being a part of that show. It was a lot of fun, and I got to work it with my wife. So that's
amazing.
Going and 5 minutes from home. So we'd go to work. I'd come home, walk my dog, go back to work at lunch. So it was a lot of fun.
The perfect job. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, that your participation in that. And I know you worked there as a Joan Calumetto's stage manager there for a couple of episodes.
Right. So. They were kind enough to throw me a bone or two on that show. God bless them.
You're part of Pawnee forever. Thank you so much, Mr. Fisher. It was fantastic talking to you. I hope we can do it again soon.
Well, I sure appreciate it. I'm like I said, I'm very flattered, and I was happy to do it.
Our next episode is Painkiller. This is season 1, episode 3. It aired originally on October the 14th, 1984. This one was written by Haskell Barkin. If that name sounds familiar, it's because we've tangled with Mr. Barkin back when we were living in the Twilight Zone. He wrote 4 segments of Twilight Zone 85. Act Break, Tooth or Consequences, and 2 for season 3, one of which was one of the very few tolerable episodes from season 3, the Curious Case of Edgar Witherspoon. The other one was Appointment on Route 17, which was just as terrible as everything else that year. He ends up writing 4 episodes of Tales from the Darkside, but I did a little digging into some of his earlier work. He did 9 episodes of Love Boat. You guys remember the cartoon The Galaxy Goof-Ups? Neither do I, but he wrote 13 episodes of that. He did write 16 episodes of Jabberjaw, though.
Oh, very nice.
There we go. And now he's writing for horror. This one is directed by Armand Mastriani, who directs 4 episodes of the series. He'll go on to direct 8 episodes of Friday the 13th, the series, which is basically a mini anthology series of its own, and 2 of that new Dark Shadows show. He also directed the feature film He Knows You're Alone. And I want to point out that the DP on this one is fresh out of film school, Ernest Dickerson, who not only was the DP for all of Spike Lee's best films, but is a hell of a filmmaker all on his own. Chris, you and I talked about one of his films on Culturecast with Ice-T and Gary Busey, Surviving the Game.
Oh, nice.
Oh, my God.
That's
Rutger Hauer, right? Is that a Rutger Hauer movie?
Yes.
Okay.
Wow.
What a great flick. Okay, this one stars Farley Granger, who's an Alfred Hitchcock alum from Rope and Strangers on a Train, also Peggy Cass, but really it stars Lou Jacoby. This is the tale of a put-upon husband who develops a back problem that may or may not be tied directly to his wife. and the sudden appearance of a mysterious man who wants to help. What'd you think of this one, Mike?
I had so much fun with this one again because Lou, you're saying Jacoby. I would say Jacoby, but
I'm going to say Jacoby now too. My first instinct was Jacoby, and then for some reason my mind at the last second said, no, fancify that.
I'm just thinking from Twin Peaks, but yeah, I love that guy. He is so great. And then to see Farley Granger show up, and I swear that they knew what they were doing when they cast Farley Granger. It's so strangers on a train when it comes to, oh, you do me a little favor, I do you a little favor, crisscross. And he is as creepy as Guy was in Strangers on a Train. I really thought that it worked well. And yeah, I just had a fun time with this. Again, half an hour, and they used the time so well. This could have dragged. We could have gotten everything that we needed within the first 5 minutes and then just been like, okay, I get it. But the way that they dole out the information, I thought was very masterful, and that it managed to keep my attention and keep me in suspense the entire time.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. This is now the second time I've seen Lou Jacoby in 6 months, thanks to you, Father Malone.
He shows up in Amazon Women, right?
Yeah, as the old man who just keeps wandering through the random TV spots.
Right, Murray, right?
Yeah.
I'm in a rock video. Come on.
He's so great. He kind of looks like the Time to Make the Donuts guy for me.
Totally. Unfortunately, my first impression of Lou Jacoby is from Amazon Women on the Moon. So every time I look at him, he's just in boxer shorts and a wife beater, staggering around in television shows.
That's what I thought of when I was watching this. So it's an interesting episode. It reminds me of the James Gregory.
Yeah, with Geraldine Page.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Where he's,
Stop killing me.
Yeah, it reminded me of that. And this is, again, like the spouse seems a hag, and they're making the life of the significant other harder, and the way out is this deplorable choice that the person makes, not thinking it'll actually happen, but it does. And we get to see all of that here, as opposed to just like the lead up to it with that episode. So I thought it was pretty great. It's pretty obvious where it's going, like the little kind of minor twist at the end of what the machinations are that take place for these things to happen. Reminds me of that, I guess it's a Matheson short story, The Box. It's kind of like that in a way too, where it's like you make this decision, someone else dies and you get $1 million. It has a twinge of that to it. I thought it was fun. Again, like Mike said, I'm going to agree with you, Mike. We're having a good time watching this show. What the fuck?
Yeah, it feels like it's been so long since I've actually had a lot of joy watching these horror anthologies. And I'm just like, I hope it doesn't end. This is so good.
What's really funny is I think back to when we had you on Chronicles from the Crypt, Mike, and it was an episode that is like one of the best episodes of that show. And you really didn't like it. And now we're doing, the three of us, a horror anthology show. Times have changed.
Yeah, I'm here for it. I really like this. And I was reminded a little bit of the one that we just talked about recently, what was it, A New Man, the one with Mel from Alice, and Vic Tayback. That whole thing that I was complaining about with that episode, where I was like, does the kid have an agreement with this guy? This one, yeah, you're talking about the machinations. It kind of makes sense. It's just, again, this twisted guy, could be Satan, doing all of these things in order to just get these people indebted to him and make people suffer. I'm like, that's pretty twisted. I like it.
And he kind of gets off on it too, which makes it that much more sinister. Like you can tell he's enjoying himself, which always makes it that much more repugnant. That's what makes that scenery being chewed that much more toothsome, because he's just such a bastard the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of scenery, my recollection of this show is it being very cheaply produced, almost like BBC in its quality. But goddamn, if this one doesn't look great, it looks like a short film. Like lots of use of shadow. Like they don't shy away. We're not getting any day for night over here in the Darkside. I'll tell you that much. Night Gallery. Back in New York this week, you can tell, for this particular episode. I will say that his shrewish wife, who is obviously the cause of all his sorrow, is correct, because computers are the future.
That's true. Yeah, just go ahead and read that huge programming book. Good luck with that.
Should I bring the book so you can study while he's laid out on the floor?
No, I'm all right.
Oh, also, Castle Thunder getting a workout in both of these episodes. Holy Lord. Calm down there, guys.
The return of our old friend.
I loved Farley Granger in this episode. Like when he shows up at first as his doctor and he says, "How did this happen?" He says, "Well, I was picking up a teaspoon and my back suddenly fell out." And he says, "Nasty things, teaspoons." It's like the most sinister reading ever of the most sort of innocuous line. Farley Granger is so creepy here.
These are the instructions for popping popcorn. It's like that. It's like, what? But that's the thing that makes this so much fun that, again, like I felt was missing from Night Gallery. Like when I think of Night Gallery and I think of the Jack Albertson episode with Bobby Darin, he should have been more menacing the way Farley Granger is here, and Bobby Darin's just not picking up on it. But that also is because, again, it's just so self-serious, it could never get out of its own way. And then we're watching this and they're just like, hey man, do your thing. Farley Granger, just go for it. And I think this show is already working better for me because everybody seems to understand the assignment a little bit more than the people did on Night Gallery, which is kind of a shame, but also at the same time, Romero taking over from Serling in the 80s kind of works for me. The people, the voices that need to be heard in the 80s aren't necessarily Rod Serling's.
The Romero, who was working at the same time as Serling in the horror genre, but had picked up the ball, like a ball that Serling had never been really interested in to begin with. He was always a fan of sort of fantasy, speculative stuff, that stuff that allowed him to get away with the sort of moralizing he was interested in. Romero isn't interested in moralizing at all. If you pick up something of social significance in his films or his TV series, great, but he wasn't really, he just wanted to scare you. And that's what we want as horror fans. Lou Jacoby pretending to be well enough to go to work was one of the most heartbreaking scenes I've ever seen on television. Just suffering through that and definitely was on his way to work. And that was awful. Also awful, but really hilarious is how readily he agrees to murder his wife once he realizes that the pain will in fact just immediately disappear. Like, okay, how we do this? Are you sure? Let's go ahead and do it.
Pain's one hell of a motivator. Just ask my boss.
If you've had back pain, you know that this guy laying on the floor and making ostensibly a deal with the devil, it would seem, to get his back pain to go away. I'm not sure I would sell my spouse down the river to fix my back pain, but if my spouse were like this in a world that is fictional, I might be convinced to, the way he is. It's back pain ain't no joke, folks.
I'm sure any of us would. She's not helping her case.
No.
Their constant interaction in horrible nature. The funny thing is, the final twist of it is that it wasn't her. It was the devil all along. He's the one controlling that pain. He turns it on and off like a switch. And his ready agreement to murder his wife ends up being just a horrible sentence for himself. The woman who shows up to apologize to him, Mrs. Tracy, the elderly confessor, the woman who accidentally, quote unquote, hit his wife with her car, is fantastic.
Oh my God. The perfect casting for that specific role. Perfect.
Yeah. Such a small role, but she really just knocks it out of the park.
Gives it away without giving anything away.
Exactly.
If he really cared at that moment, he would have known exactly what was happening. But instead, he's more interested in going out and picking up a Southwestern print shirt and a bolo tie. He's got a new lease on life, Lou Jacoby here.
When your wife was like that, hey, you got to go out and start anew, start fresh once again.
He's now a Brooklyn cowboy. Can't last. Castle Thunder making a return here as we finally figure out who Farley Granger's been this entire time. Castle Thunder working overtime and needn't have been there at all because Farley Granger's smile was enough to creep us the fuck out and send us home.
He looked really good for his age in this episode. This was what, 30 years after Rope? Wasn't that 48 or something? And
yeah.
I can't remember when Strangers on the Train was, what, 56 or I can't remember. But anyway, I thought that he looked great, and just the mustache added a nice touch to him. I thought that was a nice little devilish touch. Yeah, He's just so much fun. And it makes me really appreciate just what fun he was having.
My God, he's spry and just as energetic as anybody on screen.
He's got that glint in his eye, man. And this is great. Just that we've talked about 2 episodes with older actors in them where they are just having the time of their lives.
Yeah, obviously Night Gallery, Rod was interested in that as well, like pulling people out of mothballs and getting them reinvigorated in some way. But something's going on here where everyone's really in on it. And a lot of the people I think who ended up on Night Gallery, you could tell felt they were slumming. Whereas everyone here is they're just actors. Particularly the New York actors are just like, okay, what am I doing this week? Cool, let's go.
Fucking professionals.
Yeah, and it's paying off in dividends because I think these episodes so far have been really good. And I don't know if it's going to sustain throughout, but trending in the right direction so far.
All right, and the next episode, we're going to be talking about Tales from the Darkside, Season 1, Episodes 4 and 5. Those are The Odds and Mookie and Pookie. Until then, where can people find you, Chris Stachiw?
Hopefully not the same place you can find Mookie and Pookie. Jesus
Those
Christ.
are the 2 freaks from Nothing But Trouble.
Yeah, the Dan Aykroyd, John Candy characters. The big baby characters. No, I'm sure Father Malone actually knows the names of those characters and he would love to clue us in because we all know Father Malone's a huge Dan Aykroyd fan.
I actually don't know the names of those characters.
Oh,
sorry. I'm still thinking about Mookie and Pookie. One of either Mookie or Pookie I know is Justine Bateman. Fighting the battle against AI out there every day, man.
I love it.
Yeah. You can find me at weirdingwaymedia.com where I do all kinds of shows on my own and with Mike White doing some Barney Miller, and Father Malone and Mike and I were doing this show. So that's where you can find me doing all this stuff and 80s TV ladies, feminine critique, fomentaries, all kinds of other great stuff. weirdingwaymedia.com. Go there now.
My favorite Weirding Way Media show is Wake Up Heavy from Mr. Mark Begley. And he'll also be joining us as we talk about Chevy Chase films on the Chasing Chevy podcast. Chasing Chevy Chase, I believe, is the proper term. And that's coming out, Q2 2024? So if you work in the business world, you know what that means. I recently realized that some of my coworkers were so young they didn't know Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. So
they're younger than me is what you're saying.
I'm just like, that's really not that hard to figure out, guys.
At least they're not giving you shit for using the term.
Oh, God, thank goodness. So yeah, all over at weirdingwaymedia.com, including some other stuff that I work on, like the projection booth. And yeah, Chris and I also have a new show with Richard Haddam where we're talking about James Bond movies, which is available exclusively on our Patreons. So come on over and join the fun, why don't you? And how about you, Father Malone?
As for me, you can check out all of my nonsense over at weirdingwaymedia.com. You can hear Noise Junkies, the music podcast I co-host with Mondo Heather's Heather Drain and HP. You can also hear Night Mr. Walters, the taxi podcast, which I also co-host with HP. Speaking of HP, he wrote our theme song, so a big thanks to him. If you want to hear these episodes a week early and hear other exclusive content or just support us in any way, please go to Patreon/Father Malone. Thank you all for joining us here at Midnight Viewing. Try to enjoy the daylight.